بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا تجد له وليا مرشدا. Inshallah, today we're going to be talking about Ramadan, the rulings of Ramadan, and generally when we speak about Ramadan we're going to be covering different topics, because when you're discussing Ramadan to a woman, and the issues that relate to women are totally different than the issues that relate to the men, and that's why there's going to be special emphasis on the women's rulings. There's going to be some clarification on the women's rulings as well, inshallah, on many topics, and we're going to be, inshallah, answering most of the questions that relate to women and answering most of the questions that women are concerned about. Of course, the class is going to be in different parts, so it's going to be in 5 different parts. This is class number 1, and we're going to be pretty much talking about the most important, most important issue when we talk about Ramadan. We're going to be talking about the virtues of Ramadan, importance of fasting, but I'm going to go fast over those just because, you know, it's pretty much known to everybody, so I'm not going to talk about. You guys took it in the Sunday school, so I'm not going to be commenting much about that. But I will be talking about some of the issues that usually become controversial, usually become confusion, a place of confusion for many Muslims, like the issue of the crescent seeing versus the calculating the lunar months, and then it becomes an issue with this masjid is doing what and that masjid, and then it becomes a confusion inside the home as well. Who's required to fast Ramadan? We're going to talk about the child and others, what it means to actually train my child, and when am I obligated, and then do I have a right to tell my child that, okay, because they have the soccer game, that he can actually not fast, and what age, and the details of that. We're also going to be talking about the issues of menstruation, period, and istihada. We're going to go in details about that, because a lot of times sisters don't really know when it starts, when is the end, and what it actually means to break your fast, or when does she stop fasting if she's got istihada, or if she doesn't have istihada. How does this whole issue go? On the other part, inshallah, we're also going to be talking about old age, the matters that qualify for sickness, healthy person. We're going to be talking about the difference between Fidya and the difference between Fidya, Kafara, and also the different reasons that a person has in order to break their fast, or even, for example, pregnant and breastfeeding women. It becomes a very, very confusing issue between sisters, and plus it gets even more confusing when you go to one sheikh that says one answer and another sheikh that says another answer, and then all of a sudden you become, okay, well, what is the right answer? Or thinking, is there a right answer? Is it really a matter of right answer, or is it differences of opinions between scholars? The issue of the issues that relate to the pillars of fasting, like, for example, when we talk about intention, am I supposed to have the intention before starting my day in Ramadan, or can I have my intention later on? Is there a difference between an obligatory fast and between a non-obligatory fasting? So is there a difference, or is it the same whether you're doing this fast or that fast? You would have to have the intention before. What if in the middle of the day I all of a sudden had some thoughts that I wanted to break my fast, and then later on maybe not? Does that nullify my fast, or how does it happen? Other issues, when does breaking or starting your fast start? Is it when does imsak start? Imsak meaning starting your sahur meal, and after that. And what if I needed to take a pill? So I took a pill, and then all of a sudden, after taking the pill, whether it was 5 minutes before, 3 minutes before her alarm started, or her adhan started a minute or 2 minutes later, and all that, and then it becomes an issue. Things that break your fast. Common questions. Does food break your fast? Simple. Yes, of course. We know that part. But what are issues such as, for example, they would ultrasound, vaginal ultrasound, did a blood test, insulin, had tooth taken out, or probably some remaining foods in between the teeth, or even things that sometimes, let's say she went to an OB doctor, does she lose her fast or not? Body discharges. Does it lose your fast? And we're going to talk about different things right there. And inshallah, we're going to be talking in detail about some things. Intercourse as well, leaving Islam, changing the intention, things that prevent breaking your fast, accidentally forgetting or force, making up or paying fidya. How do we pay the fidya? Who's the one mandated to pay fidya? Am I the one that's supposed to be working to pay the fidya, or can my husband pay the fidya? Kafara. How is kafara different from fidya? What is fidya? And if we say fidya, does that actually mean that that I have to pay it from my own money, or can my husband pay it, or can my father pay it? What if she forgets the number of days that she missed throughout her life? What if she had multiple reasons, pregnancy, breastfeeding, and who knows, when she was younger, she didn't know she was supposed to be making up, and all the different details. And what is hated and liked in fasting? Breaking fast, for example, early, or hated things during fasting. We're going to talk about that. What is allowed during fasting? Died and has some days to make up. What happens to that person? I'tikaf. We might not go into details about i'tikaf, but we'll answer some questions about i'tikaf. What is i'tikaf? What's the evidence that proves its permissibility? What if a woman had her period? Can she do i'tikaf or not? Does a woman need her husband's permission for i'tikaf? What if he changed his mind? He gave her the permission, and all of a sudden he changed his mind. Can we do i'tikaf at home? Where are we not allowed to do i'tikaf? What if the woman got her period during i'tikaf? Can the woman refuse her husband's right for intimacy during i'tikaf? Zakat al-Fitr, we're not going to talk much about Zakat al-Fitr, we're just going to answer some questions about Zakat al-Fitr. Who's it paid on behalf of? How much is it? When is it to be paid? What if we forgot and it was too late? Salat al-Tarawih, we're also going to answer some questions about Salat al-Tarawih. What's the shortest and highest number of Tarawih? What if I came late and they were praying Tarawih and I still had Isha to pray? What do I do? Can I leave the masjid before praying 8 rak'ahs? Can we hold the Quran and follow along with the Imam during Taraweeh? Nafil fasting, which is the non-obligatory fasts. The light fasts, for example, 6 days of Shawwal. If I had make-up days, can I join and have the 6 days of fasting, also, or the make-up days, along with the 6 days of Shawwal with one intention? Can I do that? The white days, the best kind of fasting, we're going to talk about that as well. The haram days to fast, and of course things like the mid-Sha'ban, Rajab, fasting all life. Well, right now nobody does that. So inshallah we're going to be starting, and when we talk about Siyam, if somebody didn't have a packet, so if you missed out, you can get your own packet. What is Siyam? I'm going to go fast over this because everybody knows this introductory. What is fasting? We know that fasting Ramadan, or fasting generally, is abstaining from eating and drinking and sexual relations. And when we talk about fasting, of course, we talk about starting to fast from dawn until sunset. So we're not going to be commenting a lot on these, inshallah. The virtues of fasting as well, but we're going to go really fast over some things, inshallah. So when we speak about fasting, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually mentioned in the ayah, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. So the most important virtue about Ramadan is that it was the month that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had actually revealed the Quran in. And the fasting of Ramadan is actually the second pillar of Islam. The Prophet ﷺ said, بُنِيَ الْإِسْلَامُ عَلَى خَمْسٍ. Islam was based on five pillars, five different pillars, and mentioned fasting Ramadan. And of course, during the time of Ramadan, they're the gates that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or they're the days that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens the gates of rahmah, or opens the gates of mercy. And it's the time to get you into this training, the training in order to help you revive your Islam and your spirituality. Now, a common question people ask me, so when we say that they're the days that the shayateen are locked up, what does it mean? There's still bad people doing bad things. How is it explained? In Nawawi, who's actually a scholar from the Shafi'i madhab, explains this and says that they're not necessarily literally locked up or literally chained, but they become weak on the person that is observing Siyam. Meaning what? That the person, while they're fasting, because they're fasting, remember, every single person has a qareen. Every single person has a shaitan that's trying to control them, right? Does the shaitan control you, or does the shaitan whisper to you to do bad things? Whisper. The shaitan doesn't control you, all right? So you can't blame the shaitan. The shaitan whispers things to you. Now, when you actually make your siyam, that qareen, that qareen, the shaitan, becomes weaker because you got stronger through your siyam. So the shaitan in himself would actually feel shackled, or would feel that they got weaker, as if they were chained. And this is in Nawawi's explanation. Now, when we talk about Ramadan, we're actually talking about a moment of training in order to increase our spirituality. And when we talk about Ramadan, it's that moment of Iman enhancer. The Iman enhancer, like the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ actually said in the hadith, when Ramadan comes, the gates of paradise are opened and the gates of hell are closed, and the devils are put in chains. And when we talk about Ramadan, it's of course a time for discipline, and fasting is generally linked with true faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says in the ayah that كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِكُم, that you were ordained or prescribed to fast as those that before you have been prescribed to fast. And why? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. It's in order to help you go through the لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, to help you enhance your iman. One thing that I would like to explain, even though it's not on there, but you could see right here, just a lafta, so more of it's not necessarily something that is mentioned in a hadith, but just an observation that I realized. So if you actually look at humans, you look at animals, and you look at malaika. Animals live to eat and reproduce. Humans eat, reproduce, to live. Malaika do not eat and do not reproduce. If a human would live for eating and reproduction, his life would be an animal concept based. Alright? We're trying to get to something. Malaika only observe ibadah. They only do ibadah. Now, the deal is, if you want to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you would have to be in a spiritual state. And that's why malaika are closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than anybody else. They don't engage in any of that. To elevate humanity, to elevate mankind, to elevate humans from not being an animal-like, meaning going down a level, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered you to become from the Rabbani, ordered you to elevate your spirituality. In order to elevate your spirituality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered us in order to do some of the actions or some of the akhlaq of the malaika. To not eat or drink or engage in sexual relations. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was teaching and training us. In order for you to go up with your spirituality to an angel level, you would have to have the akhlaq of an angel. Now, a lot of times people would think that the reason why you're fasting is to feel with the poor. That's actually not quite. Because if you would actually say that you're fasting to feel with the poor, that would actually mean that you're fasting and not engaging in sexual relations to feel with the people that are not married. Right? So, not really quite. Not really accurate. But you fast, and the things that you abstain from are really for an iman elevator. In order to help you control the things that are considered the strongest drives in you as a human. The strongest drives in a human is really none other than the animal drives in us. The animal drives in us, if you're capable of controlling these drives, then the other drives are going to be easier to control. Right? The other drives are going to be easier to control. So you work on the hardest drives in order to be stronger on the other drives. Now, fasting generally is a practical embodiment of submission and servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not in order to feel with the poor, but it's actually an action in order to train the Muslim to learn how to be submissive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we say submissive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning from a different perspective, training the person in order to liberate himself from being submissive to his own desires and own whims. If you look at the world around you, the biggest desires or the biggest fitna is really in eating, drinking, and sexual relations. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us that moment in order to do that freedom, liberating yourself from submitting to none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by liberating yourself first. Because there's no way that you can free others if you can't even free your own self from your own self. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. Meaning, do you see those that take their own desire as their own Lord? Islam is about freedom. Islam is about liberation. But Islam's understanding of liberation is farther than the liberation that the different countries are talking about. Islam tells you no, there's even a higher level of liberation, and that's liberating your own self from your own self and submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, generally, we know that fasting Ramadan, as one of the 5 pillars of Islam, is mandatory upon every single Muslim, unless they had a reason not to fast. Now, having that being said, when a person reaches the age of puberty, in Islam, this is very important. Teenagers, pay attention to this. In Islam, once you hit the age of puberty, you're considered an adult, period. Alright? Adulthood does not begin when you get married or you turn 18. No, adulthood in Islam begins when you hit the age of puberty. When you hit the age of puberty, you're obligated to fast. You don't take your mom's permission or your dad's permission to fast, or say my mom gave me the permission to not fast. But in the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obligated you to fast, and obligated you, for example, to do the different requirements that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires on teenagers. Therefore, you have to know and you have to observe those as an adult. In Islam, adulthood starts with the age of puberty. Now, fasting Ramadan, all scholars agreed, based on the ayah, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامِ. Kutiba is another term that in the usul al-fiqh, in principles of fiqh, it's another term that in Islam we would consider it as proving the obligation for a duty. So you can't say I want something to say wajaba, no, or obligated. No, kutiba means prescribed. Kutiba means that you are mandated to do fasting Ramadan. Unfortunately, guys, in our day and age right now, what is common sense in Islam is becoming an issue of controversy. No, there are ayat. When we go back to the Quran, we see the Sunnah. There is no doubt about fasting Ramadan. And when does Ramadan start? Generally, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Sumu li ru'yatihi wa aftiru li ru'yatihi." Ramadan starts with a month of the lunar month Ramadan, which is after Shawwal. After Sha'ban, and then we would observe citing the new moon. Yet one thing is that a lot of times people are confused. Okay, does Ramadan start now or not? And then people become even more confused when you actually have the calculations, the scientific calculations. NASA and the different astronomers are saying that the new moon started yesterday or started today, but they would say that you won't be able to see it with your naked eye. But they would tell you they're able to see it through the telescopes. They're able to see it with telescopes. But the Prophet ﷺ said, "Sumu li ru'yatihi wa aftiru li ru'yatihi." When you see it, you fast. That is, you see the new moon, you fast the new moon for the new month of Ramadan. And when you see it, meaning the new month of Shawwal, then you would break your fast. Now, scholars have different opinions on whether seeing it means with your naked eye, or whether seeing it can be also with a telescope. Now, because of those differences of opinions, this actually causes the lay Muslims to be confused on whether they should fast or not. Let me just bring about the different evidences from both sides of the scholars, just to give you an idea, because you're going to be going through this discussion at home. So the first group of scholars, they said that we've got two hadiths. The first one, that you're supposed to be seeing it in order to start your siyam. The second hadith is that the Prophet ﷺ said, we are generally a nation that is illiterate. Illiterate meaning more like in numbers and illiterate to really know the calculations, as at the time the Persians knew. So the Prophet ﷺ just said, because of that, well, whenever you see it. So the first group of scholars, they said, see, we're not supposed to be depending on calculations. We're just supposed to be depending on seeing. Plus, generally, there's a ruling in Islam, a qaida fiqhiyya, that says, al-yaqinu la yazulu bil-shak. Whenever you're sure of something, you can't depend on doubt. And you'll be in doubt on whether you can fast or can't fast if you're only seeing it through the telescope. Well, the other scholars said, wait a minute. When the Prophet ﷺ said, "Sumu li ru'yatihi," when you want to fast, when you see the new moon, you fast for the new moon. That would actually include whether you saw it with your own naked eye or whether you saw it through a telescope. Here we are, we're seeing it. As for the hadith, they said, the Prophet ﷺ said we're an illiterate nation. It doesn't mean that we have to stay like that. The Prophet ﷺ was trying to tell you that we're an illiterate nation, meaning that they did not have the tools to calculate moons and calculate the astronomical movements at the time. Not to tell you that you have to stay like that. Now, both opinions have some level of being right. All right? Now, generally, when we actually have different opinions between scholars, if both had different perspectives, both perspectives depended on Quran or Sunnah, or depended on, let me say, textual evidences, both opinions would be respected. Both opinions would be taken as a considerable opinion. Yet, always, when there's a difference between scholars, we always say that al-khuruj min al-khilafi awla, meaning taking the opinion where everybody would agree on it is best. So, in situations where, well, you can't necessarily fast and not fast at the same time, having the ummah unite is a priority in Islam. And this matter called, in fiqh, we call it ikhtilaf al-matali'. Alright? Generally, when we actually see the differences of opinions between scholars, when you can't do both at the same time, each one actually has a good point on that matter. Now, every single country follows its own area based on what they are seeing. In situations like that, what you want to depend on, because uniting the ummah is a priority, the place that you are in, if they use citing as the tool, you can use citing as the tool. If they use calculating as a tool, you can follow that as a tool. So both opinions do actually carry some level of accuracy, and both opinions are actually right to some point. Remember, how can both opinions be right? Let me take you back to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ ordered the Sahaba, none of you shall pray Asr until they reach the land of Bani Qurayza. Bani Qurayza, that was after the battle, the trench battle, after Wazwaz al-Khandaq in the 5th year Hijrah. It was due to the Bani Qurayza, the tribe of Bani Qurayza treason, that the Muslims nearly got totally wiped out of Medina. Now the Prophet ﷺ then had to do his own work with the people of Bani Qurayza. So he asked the Sahaba not to pray unless they reach the land of Bani Qurayza. Well, land of Bani Qurayza is a little far. So in order to go there, they might actually end up in the middle of the way. Some of them figured that, well, the Prophet ﷺ didn't really mean his literal words, didn't literally mean that don't pray Asr unless you reach the land of Bani Qurayza. He meant for us to hurry. The other group of Sahaba said, no, he said we're not supposed to be praying unless we reach the land of Bani Qurayza. That's what we're going to do. So they they actually missed Asr and went and prayed Asr when they reached the land of Bani Qurayza because they wanted to obey the Prophet ﷺ's words. In other words, one understood the words literally, and the other one considered it more of a figurative understanding. Well, both parties, they went to the Prophet ﷺ, and each one told the Prophet ﷺ how they understood it, and the Prophet ﷺ accepted both opinions. Now, I personally feel that the confusion in understanding how differences of opinions between scholars are valid is the reason why the disunity happens in the ummah. And not because there are differences of opinions in whether we should fast depending on calculation or whether we should fast depending on moon cycle. I think in order to bring about the unity in the ummah is by appreciating and respecting that scholars had differences of opinions. So let's not be too fanatic in considering one opinion and rejecting another. Now, does anybody have any questions regarding this so far? No. Okay. Now, when we look at the pillars of fasting, right now we're on the second part. When we talk about the pillars of fasting, of course, it's very important to look at the pillars of fasting, because once you know the pillars, if any of the pillar is not there, that would actually mean your fast is not valid. Right? That's what it means to have a pillar. So if we say this is a pillar in salah, that means if it doesn't happen, your salah is not valid. If we say pillars of marriage, if the pillar is not there, that means this is not a marriage anymore, but a relationship of zina. Alright? This is what it means, pillar. So, looking at this, number one, we know abstaining from eating, drinking, and sexual relations. We know that one. Right? Now, when we say abstaining from eating and drinking, the ayah says, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حَتَّى يَتَبَيْنَ لَكُمُ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ. And eat and drink until you're able to distinguish the white line from the black line. Now, the white line from the black line, all right, and this is something, just on a side, is that a lot of times people want to. Right now, we're starting to get in our day and age, because of the confusion, or let me say, because many are actually ignorant on Islam. Right now, we're starting to get these weird interpretations on Islam. Somebody telling me that hijab is about barrier between you and sin, and somebody giving you all these different interpretations. So, to explain this, even the Sahaba during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, like Adi ibn Hatim, he actually thought, okay, well, black line and white line, so he would put them underneath his pillow and then take them out. Take them out and see. Am I able to see the white line from the black line? I'll keep on eating. And then the Prophet ﷺ explained it to the Sahaba that it wasn't an actual thread. It's not literally a thread, but it's the horizon, the line in the horizon that distinguishes the night from the day, and it's called the Fajr al-Sadiq. What is al-Fajr al-Sadiq? There's a for those that live far away from the city, you would actually see at one point, like around 2 a.m., there would be all of a sudden like a sudden brightness in the horizon, and then it becomes dark again. This is called al-Fajr al-Kadhib, or al-Fajr al-Kadhib, let me translate that. Al-Fajr al-Kadhib meaning the fake Fajr. Alright? Al-Fajr al-Sadiq is the true Fajr, which is when it's actually about to get the Fajr, about to get sunrise, and the dark night is about to close. This is al-Fajr al-Sadiq. That fine line between night and day, you would see it in the horizon, and that's al-Khayt al-Abyad and al-Khayt al-Aswad. So, the other pillar is, of course, having the intention for fasting. I want to comment on having the intention for fasting a little bit, because a lot of confusion happens there. When we talk about having the intention, what does it mean? Number one, you don't necessarily have to utter or say, voice out your intention. You don't voice out your intention. And the only time that you voice out your intention is for Hajj or Umrah, like a Hajj. Only for Hajj or Umrah. Yes, the Shafi'i madhab, if we got people from Bilad al-Sham, Shafi'i madhab do, or Egypt. Shafi'i madhab do regard that you utter your intention. And the reason why I'm just mentioning that, because I know people come from different backgrounds. All right. The utterance of your niyyah is actually not required whatsoever. Utterance of your niyyah only in Hajj and Umrah. Any other duty, you don't utter your niyyah, not even for salah. So you don't say labbaika or nawaitu an usalli arba rak'at or etc. or 4 rak'at hadiran mustaqbilan al-qibla. You already know that. And this is something very common, especially in Palestine, for example, Bilad al-Sham. They would say, I am having the intention to pray my 4 rak'ahs facing the qibla and making it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No, it's kind of like taking a matan or taking the blocks of the words and actually saying it. No, this is explaining it to you, but this is what you want to do. But it doesn't mean that you say, I am having my intention to do such and such and such. Same thing with Ramadan. You don't say, nawaitu siyam. You automatically, just by you having the feeling on the inside that tomorrow I'm going to be fasting, just something that on the inside you intend to do it would actually mean your fast is right now built on intention. Now, when we say built on intention, this brings up, so what if I overslept suhoor time? I wasn't sure which intention it was. When I say differences of opinions between scholars, just on the side, okay, footnote, number 1. All right. When I say differences of opinions between scholars, don't get confused from that word. Because when I say differences of opinions between scholars, number 1, know that you might ask a sheikh and he might give you that answer. 2, that answer or that opinion also is based on some ayah or hadith or some evidence. 3, that the person that is required to look at the evidences is the specialist. To look at the evidences and weigh the evidences, which is a strong hadith, which is a weak hadith, etc. That's the specialist. Number 4, when you have differences of opinions between scholars, that's not mentioned on there, so start taking notes. When you have differences of opinions between scholars, you as a questioner, you have several duties. Number 1, you want to seek the scholar that has ilm. You want to seek the scholar that has ilm. 2, you want to seek the scholar that has piety. 3, when you want to ask a question, research before you ask the question. You don't necessarily want to give too much details, and this is very common. Sorry ladies, I'm not a misogynist and I'm not a feminist either, but unfortunately I get sometimes phone calls that may last 4 hours when all you need is just 1 minute. All right? And that sometimes results in me rejecting important phone calls because I wouldn't know if it's going to be a 4-hour call or just a 5-minute call. So research before you actually ask the question. Right now, there are great websites such as Islam Online, Islam Web, Islam Q&A. There are great websites that will actually give you lots of information on every single topic and every single question that might actually come across your mind. Number 5, do not fatwa shop. And that's very common. It's like I'm looking for the easiest answer. Don't look for the easiest answer. Don't fatwa shop. Look for what you see that the scholar has the qualification to answer these questions. there are differences in specialties in Islam, just like you wouldn't necessarily go asking about an OB topic. You don't go to a cardiologist. You're going to the wrong person. If you have an OB issue, you go to a gynecologist or an OB. If you have something that is related to your heart, you go to a cardiologist, right? And that's the same thing. It's very important. There's nothing wrong with asking the Shaykh, are you specialized in fiqh? Are you specialized in fiqh? Can I ask a question related to that? Same thing. If your son had a confusion on atheism or whatever have you, ask him, are you specialized in aqidah? Are you specialized in that particular topic? Because having an imam does not mean that they're specialized in everything in Islam. Alright? Now, another thing I would want to say when we're talking about asking for a fatwa, what is even more important than all of this is actually taking moments and taking classes to bring about awareness and to understand your deen. It'll save you lots of questions, lots of time, and it'll help you understand your Islam. This will help you. And it'll save you lots of questions. Now, why did I get there? Yeah, so when we talk about intention, now we're going to jump to the intention part. All right? The scholars had different opinions on whether when we have already wanted to fast. All right? Now, what if for Ramadan, all scholars agree that you have to have the intention for fasting Ramadan. Alright? You have to have the intention. But if it's in the non-obligatory fasts, do I have to have the intention before Fajr, or can I have the intention after Fajr? What time is it now? 2. Yeah. I didn't think until now. Let's just assume. Alright? And then you decided, Maghrib is going to be about 9 p.m. or 8 p.m. So why don't I just continue my day? I think I'm able to continue my day fasting. Can we do that or not? Now, scholars had different opinions on this. And it's actually in the madhab itself. To make the story short, is that the preponderant, when we say preponderant, it is based on my personal study, looking at the hadith or looking at the ayat or looking at the study in order to see what is probably the strongest opinion. Another scholar you might ask, and he will say, well, the preponderant is you cannot. That's based on his study. So I'm just here trying to bring about the definition of preponderant. The preponderant opinion is that if you wake up without your intention, meaning you missed your intention, you didn't wake up early, you did not have that in the previous night, and you decided that you wanted to fast, even though you didn't have support, did not do all the previous intention, preparation, you can actually fast because of the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ came to Shaykha Aysha and he said, do you have anything to eat? And she said, no. And the Prophet ﷺ said, okay, I'm starting my fast. In another hadith, Shaykha Aysha actually said that the Prophet ﷺ came and he said, do you have any? She said that today we actually got hais. Hais is about, it's a meal that is from like butter and goat's milk. They would do it together. And anyhow, so she said, yes, this is what we have. So the Prophet ﷺ said, I woke up fasting, but now I'm going to eat. The Prophet ﷺ is teaching Shaykha Aysha. And from that hadith, the scholars that actually said you don't have to have your intention for the non-obligatory fasts or you started your intention late, to be more accurately said, or of a stronger opinion than majority of scholars said that for Ramadan or for obligatory fasts, you would have your intention on the day before. Let's do it again. Obligatory fasts, you would have your intention before. With the Madhab Hanafi for the Pakistanis, Madhab Hanafi says otherwise. You guys generally, let me just explain the issue of Madhab. You don't necessarily have to have a Madhab. Alright? Your Madhab is the person that's teaching you that particular fiqh. But generally, Madhab are pretty much let me say what makes up your culture. So if you're Pakistani, you're pretty much going to be Hanafi based in a lot of your things. If you are from Bilad al-Sham, you're either going to be Shafi'i or you're going to be Hanbali, depending on where you're from. And if you're Moroccan or Tunisian, you're pretty much going to be Maliki. Alright? Any Moroccans here? I can see. Moroccans, mashallah. So you guys are pretty much Maliki background. And your culture would be generally Maliki. Alright?
Forget the Somalis.
Somalis are generally Shafi'i. Yeah, Shafi'i. Oh, majority is well, no, we can't forget Somalis. We can't forget Somalis. Somalis make up Minnesota right now.
Yeah.
That's it. Now, when must the intention be changing the intention? Okay, changing the intention. Looking at both of the ahadith that we mentioned. If you change your intention, all right, when is it considered that I changed my intention, therefore it alters my action? Once you take a move, meaning what? If you decided, I'm not really sure I want to fast today. This is for non-obligatory fast. I'm not really sure I want to fast today. And all of a sudden you got busy with something else. But did you actually take an action to terminate your fast? No, you didn't. But if you said, I'm not really sure I'm ready to fast today, and you took a sip of water. Alright, what does that do? That terminates your fast. Alright? Now, if you take action that expresses your intention, that's when the intention became that action that decides or determines your fast. Alright? Sometimes it can happen that we're not really sure. I'm not really sure if I want to continue my fast. You start, you're not determined yet, but you're not really sure. And that happens a lot, and people are like, I don't know. I was worried about it, but I didn't actually take a move. There's a main qaida fiqhiyya, there's a main principle in fiqh, in Islam, is that al-yaqinu la yazulu bil-shak. You cannot be in doubt in something and regard that as of a stronger thing than being sure of something. You're supposed to be sure, and we base what is for sure. We base the opinion, or we base the ruling based on what you're sure of. Did you actually eat? No, I didn't. Therefore, your fast is still valid. But I was worried. I wasn't sure what I'm going to do. No. What you're not sure is not what I'm discussing. Did you actually take the step to transfer and interpret your intention into action? I didn't eat. Okay, your fast is still valid. Continue fasting. Now, let's continue on the other part and the different types of fasting. Now,
can I ask something?
Yep, go ahead.
If I understand this correctly, with obligatory fast, what if your intentions weren't clear? Then does your
Say it again.
Let's say I'm doubting myself with
Your doubt in your what?
if I'm going to break my fast and I'm
Okay.
questioning myself, but it's obligatory fast.
Okay.
Then
Obligatory fast obligatory fast generally, you are mandated to continue it. Scholars had different opinions on if you broke a mandated fast. You guys pay attention to this. If you broke a mandated fast, on whether you have to make up the day that you broke, meaning that you make up two. Scholars had different opinions on that. The preponderant is that no, you're just at sin for breaking that make-up fast, which was for obligatory fast, but not required to make up another day. All right? That day you didn't complete it, that means that day you did not get the reward for making up, but you got the sin for breaking an obligatory fast. Did that answer your question? Okay. Types of fasting. Go. Anybody else?
Hi. Can you, for Ramadan, can you set your intention for the whole month instead of the night before?
Good question. Scholars had different opinions, like the Maliki madhab. Scholars had different opinions on whether I can have one intention for the whole Ramadan, or whether every single day I have to have had the intention from the previous night. By looking at the differences of opinions, I see that the differences of opinions are more, let me call it word differences, not really action, not really related to something on ground. Because anyways, once we actually hit the month of Ramadan, automatically you would have the intention, all right, it's the month. You don't have to, okay, tomorrow is a new day, day number 2, day number 3, day number 4. No, you know very well from the first day that we hit the month. And now we're going. So if you would have the intention, the preponderant, if you would have had the intention just by you, now it's Ramadan, you actually, preparing yourself, and now all that would actually say that you're putting the intention in place. All right, go ahead.
After period, should we make another one?
After what?
Period, like if I have period.
After your period, should you make what?
Another niyyah?
Another niyyah after.
Yeah.
Okay, good question. So generally, remember, anyways, if you for example, you made ghusl, and this is really important, if you want to fast Ramadan, all right, you don't necessarily have to be in a state of tahara. You know what that means? Mm-hmm. For example, let's say a sister finished her period, all right, or in a state of janaba, all right, and she wasn't sure, should I make suhoor first and then go make my ghusl, or should I make my ghusl before adhan? No. You don't have to rush, because tahara is not required for fasting. Tahara is not a requirement for fasting. So you can make your ghusl after you prepare suhoor and after the adhan. There's no need to rush. All right? Now, for the intention part, once you actually prepare yourself, generally you would know, okay, if the period ended, for example, then you would say, okay, it ended. Now I have to fast. Generally, the intention is on the inside. And scholars, but this is just to explain, scholars also have differences of opinions. And remember, when we say scholars have differences of opinions, so you won't get confused and say, I heard the sheikh tell me something else. All right? Anybody else has another question? Go ahead.
So if you're making up the day that you make in Ramadan, you can still change your, like, I decided to fast today, can I just make it? No, I'll just eat later. And then
okay, so for the intention, when it comes to an obligatory fast includes make-up fast, includes fast for kafara, all right? And we'll talk about that in just a bit. Now, any obligatory fast, majority of scholars regarded that you have to have your intention from a previous night, meaning from Fajr. Majority of scholars said that you have to have your intention from the day, that is a couple of hours before, during that Fajr. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay. Yet they did have differences of opinions, or let me say they were more lenient when it came to non-obligatory fasting. Are you understanding? So when it comes to the obligatory fast, stay on the safe side and make your intention from Fajr if you're doing an obligatory fast. Obligatory fast includes makeup fasting. Is everybody understanding me? I can see perplexed faces. Okay. When we look at the types of fasting, it's very important to look at these because the rulings are going to be making a difference. Number one, obligatory fasts are divided into fasting Ramadan or the fasting of Kafara or fasting of Nadhr. What is Kafara? Kafara can be related to, for example, killing somebody. Oh, you know what? We're going to go ahead and talk about this in just a bit anyways. Voluntary fasts are basically the different fasts other than Ramadan. Fasting 6 days, etc. Let's give an example. Obligatory fasting of Ramadan, making up days you missed in Ramadan. And a kafara. What is a kafara? The word kafara actually means to wipe. So the word kafara, you are wiping out a sin. You're paying a ransom, or you are doing some kind of a ransom. You're trying, because you made a mistake in something, you're trying to remove that mistake. The kafara can be in paying money, but not for everything. All right? Kafara can be in fasting. It depends on the sin. All right? It depends on the sin. And the kafara can be in freeing a slave. It depends on the sin. Now, every single sin has a certain type of kafara. Every single type of sin has a different type of kafara. So the kafara, it's not all the same. So the kafara here, for example, accidental killing, you would have to fast 2 months in a row. The kafara for dhihar, what is dhihar? Dhihar is when the man, and that was something that was practiced during Jahiliyyah, where when the man would tell his wife, you're like my sister to me, or like my mother to me. The kafara for having intercourse during the day of Ramadan is fasting 2 months, 2 consecutive months. Alright? And we'll talk about that later on, inshallah. The kafara for breaking a yameen. What is a yameen? Wallahi. Not the Somali yameen. Okay? Because that would be there are 3 different types of yameen. Yameen munaqada, yameen al-lahu, and yameen al-ghamus. Yameen al-munaqada is the yameen when you say wallahi and you intentionally and you actually confirm it on the inside that you really mean it. You made it as a swear. This is a yameen munaqada. That's the one that has a kafara. If you didn't act by it. Let's just suppose. Give an example for yameen really fast when we talk about this. Yameen. Somebody said, Wallahi, I'm going to pray Salat al-Duha tomorrow. Alright? Wallahi, I'm going to pray Salat al-Duha tomorrow. This would be a yameen that you just put on yourself. You really meant it. But the yameen that is lahu, kind of like Somali, wallahi, just anything. Alright? This would be yameen lahu, meaning that it's not necessarily considerable yameen. Not something that you intentionally, it's more of a mouth or a habit that people would use. Yameen al-ghamus is different. That's when it relates to people's rights. You can't take somebody else's rights and say, I'll just make a kafara and get everything over with. Nope. A different story. Each and every single one of these sins and there's even more, but this is just an example, has a different type of kafara. Now, fasting, another obligatory fast is fasting for the Hajj. For the Hajj, those that are doing tamattu. That's a different thing. We're not going to go in details about that. The other part is fasting in fulfillment of a vow or an oath, which is in nadr. That's a different thing. The other mustahab fasting, mustahab meaning that it's light. Right? Mustahab fasting, that it's light. Fasting Ashura, Tas'a and Ashura. Fasting Arafah. Fasting on Mondays and Thursdays. Fasting on 3 days of each month, which is the white days. The reason why they're called white days is basically because it's a full moon during those days. The fasting of 6 days of Shawwal. Fasting the month of Sha'ban, or fasting most of the month of Sha'ban. Fasting the days of Muharram. And fasting alternative days. Alright? Makruh days to fast are, for example, singling out Fridays. We'll talk about that inshallah later on. Singling out Fridays. The person singling out Fridays because the Prophet ﷺ said, do not fast on a Friday unless you fast a day before or a day afterwards. Right? That is, when we talk about singling out Fridays, that is, if we're actually discussing that you make that intention the reason why you're fasting because it's a Friday. But if, for example, it happens to be a Friday, you don't work on Fridays and you feel that that's the best day for you to make up your fast because you work Saturdays and you work Thursdays, there's nothing wrong with it. Alright? Is everybody with me here? That it would be an issue if you're singling out Fridays for the sake of singling out. Not that it happens to be something that it just happens to be that's your day off. Alright? You can actually do that with differences of opinions between scholars. Singling out Saturdays because tashabbuh, because imitating the Jews on Shabbat, for example. Any kind of imitation, by the way, in Islam, any type of imitation, whether it's for the people of the book or whether it's for other groups or deviated groups, even if it's a Muslim deviated group, even if it's a Muslim deviated group, would be considered haram to practice like them or imitate them. The Prophet ﷺ says, "Man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa minhum." If you imitate any group of people, you're part of them. Now, the forbidden fast, Eid al-Fitr, it's just one day. Eid al-Adha, 3 days, they're called Ayyam al-Tashriq. And the fasting of Yawm al-Shak, the day of doubt, which is the 30th of Sha'ban. 30th of Sha'ban, meaning the month that comes before Ramadan. Yep. Ayyam al-Tashriq. No, Ayyam al-Tashriq.
Then what's
Ayyam al-Tashriq would be the first day of Eid al-Adha, the second day of Eid al-Adha, the third day of Eid al-Adha.
in all these 3 then?
All these 3 days you can't fast.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Fast observed by women, so generally women that are menstruating or going through postpartum, it would be haram for them to fast. As mentioned in the hadith. So and remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let me just comment on this because we're starting to see a lot of sisters and a lot of women under the label of women's rights and so many different things actually changing Islam and changing the rulings of Islam and bringing about these new interpretations. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says, مَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَمْرًا أَن يَكُونَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَرَةُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no non-believing man or believing woman, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed something, that they would say, I have a different opinion. And that was something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mentioned. So part of Iman is that for mu'min, I see the textual evidence, Quran and Sunnah, I'm going to say it. Even if right now, all these different opinions and all these different feminists and all whatever you have you are right now coming up with all these slogans about different rights. You say, well, wait a minute. Is it mentioned in the Quran? Is it mentioned in the Sunnah? Now, permissible. Did we do this?
Question.
Yep. Go ahead.
Two questions. One is about the fasting thing. Fasting.
Which one?
The first one, kafara or
Kafara? Oh, kafara. Okay.
yeah. How do you do?
Kafara?
Everybody knows what our sins are through my life. How I know. If I fast now Thursday and Monday, then for just the intention.
Okay, kafara, when we say kafara, this is not just general ma'asi, this is not general sins. It's not because you backbit a girl or a woman or you somehow gossiped at someone. This is not a kafara.
I like to say wallahi or something like that.
That's different. A kafara is when there are certain sins that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarded that it has a kafara. So not you regarding, well, I gossiped at a girl, so I'll just fast 3 days as a kafara. No. There are certain sins that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had assigned that particular sin has a kafara, and the kafara of it is such and such and such.
You say wallahi too, right?
Wallahi, that's a yameen. That's a whole different topic, which is for oath, yameen. The kafara for al-yameen, it depends on the kind, and there's lots of details on every single yameen.
You don't know. Maybe I say in my life was off.
No, because there's a difference between just saying wallahi as a word of mouth, like a habit, and between saying wallahi and you mean it.
I think what he's trying to say is, like, for example, we just found out this, and she didn't know about the kafara, and maybe she did it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Could she still?
Do they count whatever?
So generally, many people will have this OCD and, oh, maybe I did a yameen and I forgot about it. All right. Generally, we would make dua. You don't make a kafara of something when you're not sure that you actually made a yameen. Okay. You just make dua. اللهم لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. Right? لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. Ya Allah, don't hold us accountable for things that we forgot or things that we made by mistake. Alright? So you wouldn't make a kafara on something that you are not sure that I made a yameen and I forgot to pay the kafara for it. You see what I mean? Okay.
The other question, I'm sorry, is about Islam. We have, some Quran and Sunnah, you say, right? And you say Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he doesn't say by himself, he just says, so it comes from Allah and he says, he doesn't say by himself. But
okay.
From Allah, he
ما ضل صاحبكم وما غوى وما ينطق عن الهوى إن هو إلا وحي يوحى.
Yeah, so since we say that, so the hadith in the Quran is the same.
Okay. So hadith and Quran, are they the same? Is that what you're saying?
Because the hadith is what we have hadith, what we practice.
Right. Hadith, what was said by the Prophet ﷺ, or his actions, or any reports that were done on the Prophet ﷺ, or any description on the Prophet ﷺ.
So it's related to
all this is related to Sunnah.
Related to Quran, right? Because
of course. So let me tell you one thing. When we say Sunnah, Sunnah has 4 different definitions. When we say Sunnah, not everything that we say Sunnah means that you don't have to practice. Sunnah, in terms of it being a reference, all scholars, all Muslims have agreed that Sunnah, meaning the reports of the Prophet ﷺ, the words of the Prophet ﷺ, the descriptions of the Prophet ﷺ, are obligatory to take as a reference. But if the Prophet ﷺ, for example, said in the hadith, I would have ordered you to do siwak for every single salah. Did he order us to do siwak for every single salat? No. It was by the report itself that the Prophet ﷺ, because he didn't want to make it a burden on us, he did not order us to do that. That takes another type of definition. The definition of the level of mandation. Are you understanding me here? So, there are four different definitions of sunnah. The definition of sunnah to mean that you have to take it as a reference, all Muslims would take that definition from the resource perspective. As for, you can have an ayah, you can even have an ayah that can tell you that that action is a sunnah, even though it's an ayah that was mentioned. For example, the ayah says, when you leave your Salat al-Jum'ah, فَانْتَشِرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَاسْعَوْا. You're going to pretty much go to your works and do what you need to do. Does that make it obligatory for me to go and work on Fridays? No. Are you understanding me? So having it in the Quran, for example, and the reference being non-obligatory to do, is different from it being a reference.
So the Quran says you can do your own work, right?
Yes, it does.
So,
Yeah, that's Surah al-Jum'ah.
so since it says, and it says in the Sunnah,
No, it gave you the option. When the Quran or when a hadith gives you the option that you can do or you can leave, that takes it from the level of being mandatory to the level of being a sunnah. You can do an optional, it can be recommended or not. Alright? Alright, how did we get there? Okay. Did we do makruh?
Yeah.
Okay. Did we do the forbidden? Okay. Permissible? Okay, permissible fasts are other than those days of fasting. Those would be the permissible days for fasting. Who must fast? Alright, now we go into some things. All scholars agreed that fasting is obligatory upon every sane, healthy Muslim male who's not traveling at the time. As for a woman, she must not be menstruating or having postpartum bleeding. We're going to talk about that in detail in just a bit. People who are insane, minors, and those who are traveling, menstruating, or going through postpartum bleeding, and the elderly, or breastfeeding, or pregnant women do not have to observe fasting. We're going to talk about that in just a bit. Being Muslim, we're going to take one at a time. Right now, this is in general. Now we're going to discuss each and every single one of them. Number one, being Muslim is what makes you responsible for practicing Islam. Alright? Number one. If you believe in Islam, that would mean that you consider the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the lens you see through them. Right, wrong, obligations, and the non-obligatory things around you. If you want to see the world in the lens that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created it in, you want to look through Quran and Sunnah. Quran and Sunnah, you have two eyes. Look through Quran and Sunnah. And I always say this. Imam Ibn al-Arabi al-Maliki is a scholar from the Maliki madhab. On one issue, he said, as for Abu Hanifa, فَقَدْ جَعَلَ الْقُرْآنَ مِرْآتَهُ فَأَبْصَرَ الْحَقِّ. He made the Quran be the lens that he sees through it, the world, and he was able to see the truth. Even though he comes from the Maliki madhab, and that's Ibn al-Arabi al-Maliki, but he said that about Abu Hanifa. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and for a mu'min, for a Muslim, that you actually obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and of course, that ما كان لمؤمن ولا مؤمنة إذا قضى الله ورسوله أمرا أن يكون لهم الخيرة من أمرهم. For a believing man and a woman, that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered something, you don't say, well, I have a different opinion on this. Now, that makes it obligatory on every single person that says, I'm Muslim. All right? Now, as for somebody that is insane, what determines the level of mind and being able to think? Number one, understanding. When we talk about being sane, we're talking about being capable of understanding the words of Quran and Sunnah and being able to understand how it's supposed to be applied. Now, the Prophet ﷺ actually said in a hadith, and this one, I want you to pay attention to it. The Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, and maybe I can jump really fast. I don't know where to put it. The Prophet ﷺ actually in a hadith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rufi' al-qalam, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had not or had raised the pen from writing upon three people. The person that is asleep until they wake up. The person that is insane until they become sane. The person that is a child until they reach the age of puberty. Fasting and children. Alright? Now, by the way, speaking of being insane, when we look at right now, we have so many different things. What is an insane person? If there is a way to explain to that person that has a level of mental disorder, what it means to fast and what it means to practice it, then they would be held accountable and they have to fast. All right? So, for example, an autistic person, all right, are they able to understand it or not? Somebody that's on the spectrum is able to totally understand it. Even somebody that is autistic, you're talking about some autistic people actually being math geniuses. All right? I have an autistic child myself, so I know he's only 3 years old and he's already reading at a second grade level. So I cannot say that when he reaches the age of puberty that he is unaware or not smart enough to understand the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We would have to do the measures that are needed to explain it to that person. And there's a difference between somebody that has a mental disability where they're totally unaware of the world around them, and between somebody that has some mental disability or psychological disorder such as schizophrenia. Somebody that has schizophrenia does not mean they don't know what's going on around. So it doesn't mean that if somebody has schizophrenia that, okay, well, they're not required to fast. Unless they're taking medications, it's a different story. All right? Unless they're taking medications, it's a different story. But if somebody is capable of understanding the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're going to be required as a guardian to actually tell them that they have to, what it means to fast and the rulings that relate to it. As for children, now we mentioned earlier that in Islam, when we talk about children, we said that it's somebody that did not reach the age of puberty. If they reach the age of puberty, then they are required to fast. Reaching the age of puberty for girls is reaching not necessarily getting the period, but having the physical changes that if somebody is seeing this girl, will say she's a grown woman. It's not necessarily by getting the period. And this is something that a lot of times it becomes like a sudden thing for a girl, and she would say, okay, you got your period, now you're going to have to do everything. Not quite. The changes that she's going through, or even for the boy, once those changes have taken place, the physical changes that boys or girls go through, that would actually mean they're right now going into the age or stage of being held accountable for their things. And that's where it is very important for mothers to take that transition and that gradual transition for the boy and the girl to prepare them. From, for example, age 9 or 10, to tell them right now, those changes are actually meaning you're a grown girl. You're a grown woman. You should be responsible. You're a grown boy. Do this, do that. Helping your child be responsible. Be responsible even in the world around them. Even taking their own bath, putting their own plate, cleaning their room is part of helping your child be responsible when they're teenagers. Many teenagers are not right now responsible even over their chores, even over their salah, because we did not teach them how to be responsible when they were even younger on how to act like adults. You train them when they're even younger. Take your bag. Take care of your room. Take care of your homework, etc. Help in the house chores. All that. It's not mom's responsibility. Mom's responsibility is to train the child how to become a good, healthy adult. A good, healthy Muslim. Adult Muslim. Not to baby them. Anyhow. Now when it comes to fasting in children, once they hit the age of puberty or the signs of age of puberty, then they're obligated to fast. If the mom, for example, takes it upon herself and says, oh, they're still too young, he's only 13, guess what happens? She will be held accountable for two things. One, giving the wrong fatwa. Two, she will be held accountable for not training her child. And there's nothing worse than giving the wrong fatwa. Now, when we look at the child, a question that comes up is, how did the children during the time of the Prophet ﷺ actually learn how to fast? Number one is that Umar ibn al-Khattab said that it was narrated on Umar ibn al-Khattab that a man he saw wasn't fasting, and then he said, like, how dare you, or woe unto you? How can you not fast when even the children are actually fasting? Now, teaching children how to fast is one important method, or one important training that the mothers have to actually consider in teaching their children, getting them into that level of being able to fast. Now, generally, like we said, that when they're not held accountable, what about the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, teach your children how to make salah and strike them or hit them at the age of 7 or at the age of 10. Okay, so you start from the age of 7 and you strike them at the age of 10. Now, let me just comment on that hadith. Okay, because many are going to say Islam teaches violence. Okay, pay attention to this.
You say no comments on...
What was that?
You say no comments on...
No. I'm going to comment. I said no violence. All right, no, I'm going to comment. Number one is that scholars actually have differences of opinions on the level of authenticity of this hadith. All right, that's number one. Some scholars regard it as authentic or hasan. Others regard it as hadith sahih, and others regard it as hadith sahih. The differences of opinions, even in considering one hadith authentic or not, is for the narrators, some narrators. Number two, even if we are to assume that this hadith is authentic, that does not mean that the violence is permissible because the child is not praying or because the child is not fasting. The type of striking that is mentioned in the hadith must not be mubadah. What does that mean? It means that it must not, yarhamkumullah, it must not leave any bruises on the child. It must not puncture the body. It must not break the body. It must not bleed the body. Because that type of violence is not allowed whatsoever. Because that type of violence becomes a torture and not a discipline. And that's totally haram. So the type of striking, whatever you want to call it, mentioned in the hadith is actually talking about more discipline, striking, and not beating in where you're leaving bruises and etc. Having that being said, it is not illegal to actually discipline your child in that way. It is illegal and haram to puncture your child, to bleed your child, to break your child, to torture your child, to choke your child. All those things are haram and illegal. But it's not haram to discipline your child, and it's not illegal to discipline your child even if it meant a strike. As long as you're not leaving, and I'm talking from the legal standpoint as well. Not just haram, not just the Sharia standpoint. And it's very important to discipline from even younger than the age of 7. Alright? Even younger than the age of 7, because it becomes a habit from earlier than that. How do you train a child? Telling them the virtues of fasting. Give them prior experience in getting them used to fasting, like fasting certain days or fasting half a day, fasting part of the day and increasing the time gradually, delaying suhoor until the last part of the night. That will help them fast during the day. Encourage them to fast by giving them rewards each day or week, putting stickers, etc. Praising them in front of the once a week, for example. Or if you would fast 4 days or 5 days, I would take you to the restaurant or whatever. Instilling the spirit of competition, if it's more than one child. And distracting them when they're hungry, probably not for long hours, but probably giving them to play with on the iPad, for example, just to encourage them. Make sure that it's halal stuff, not things that, it's just getting them to quiet. It is preferred that, for example, taking them to the masjid more frequently and arranging visits during the day for families so that children would actually have that support between one another. And of course, this is very important to actually talk about when women also, there's maybe you can do support groups on how to teach your child and how to go up those paths. Now, one thing is, this is what I was actually looking for. This is for Sister Fatima. What's the difference between Fidya and Kafara? All right? I know we're jumping into a different topic. This was supposed to be somewhere else, but I don't know why the slide came in here. So fasting is obligatory by terminally, if the fast is obligatory and the person is terminally ill or incapable of fasting, then they would pay fidya. Alright? This is to explain it. So the person is obligated to fast, but forever terminally ill, then they would pay fidya. I know this is out, this one just came. Fasting, what is a kafara? Fasting is obligatory, but the person had a reason to break their fast. Could be because of a journey, menstruation, postpartum, temporary illness, breastfeeding. That would mean kafara. Alright? Now, for the person, when we look at, for example, the one before, we said that the person, if the person is forever not being able to fast. For example, let's take one example at a time. Somebody that has some kind of a insane, can't pray. All right? Do they pay fidya? No. Why? Because although they're terminally terminally incapable, but they're not obligated to fast. The elderly, they're terminally incapable, unless they're going to get young again. That's not going to happen. Right? So they would pay fidya. Now, for somebody that had a reason to break their fast, each one would have a different story. They would pay kafara, but kafara can be either in paying money or kafara can be in making up fasting. But this does not include for every single person. So, person that's on a journey, you can't say, I want to pay kafara by paying money. No. Person that's on a journey, your kafara is to make up by fasting. No other answer. Girl that had her period, your kafara is to make up fasting. Kafara for postpartum. Differences of opinions between scholars on whether she pays, fasts, or does both. Temporary illness, had a flu, had some kind of any other illness, then they would have to make up through fasting. Breastfeeding, 2 opinions. Or sorry, 3 opinions. Is it paying kafara meaning through feeding people, or is it through fasting, or is it both together? We're going to talk about that later on, inshallah. Let me see, what time is it? It's 3, but we'll do just a couple more so we can.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we'll do just a couple more, inshallah. For the elderly and the chronically ill, remember, just like when we did the one before, if the person is elderly or chronically ill, they have a terminal reason that they will not be able to fast. Now, when we say elderly or chronically ill, that would actually mean they have the right not to fast, but they would be paying the fidya, not kafara, fidya. Fidya is different than a kafara, because a kafara is when you do something wrong and you compensate, or you pay a ransom for it. But the fidya, you didn't do a mistake. For the fidya, if the person is capable of paying a fidya, which is approximately $11 per day, then they would pay the fidya for that particular day. If they are able to pay it from their own money, then they would have to pay it. Whether they're taking retirement, SSI, whatever it is, then they would have to pay it. If they can't afford it, they would just do istighfar. Alright? Let's say they can't afford it. And we have a lot of people that can't afford it, you guys. I recently discovered that. I thought in America we don't have any poor people. Oh, yes, there are. There are many people out there that really cannot afford it. Their SSI is $700 and their rent is $600 and they're barely going to make it. Alright? So there are many people out there and their EBT barely covers their food. So it's out there. It's out there. So if you also need to pay zakat, put your zakat in, to give your zakat to people. There are people that need it, even here in the U.S. Anyhow, so for the elderly and chronically ill, like I said, they would be paying fidya. Now, what's place to place?
The fidya, $11
Fidya? Yeah, of course. Of course, we're talking about pretty much in Minnesota, in the U.S. Of course, if you were in Palestine, the price would be very different.
So the fidya different.
Of course, it varies, and they'll do these calculations. They do these calculations in order to decide. So $10 is considered, or $11 in Africa, it's considered a monthly income.
Yeah. So where the place we have, how much you spend to eat a day? That's how you consider.
Yep, it's considered like the average meal in that where you are. Yep, that's how we would do it. So the average meal in that particular place that you're in. Pretty much $11. food and a drink. That's $11 right there, right? All right. For the temporarily ill, and the ayah is clear, so the person that is temporarily ill, they can't observe that fasting. Now, the question is, how mild is the illness that is considered? Number one is that scholars had different opinions, by the way, just to tell you. Because some scholars said it doesn't matter how mild it is, like Ishaq ibn Rahawayh actually said even if you got a finger cut, right? And you got other scholars that said no, if we're talking about an illness that is affecting your capacity to continue your fast, or it's delaying your healing process. Remember, dehydration and lack of fluids, all that actually prolongs your healing, right? Even if it meant a flu, right? So in that situation, you can actually break your fast, and it doesn't have to be through a doctor's prescription. All right? It doesn't have to be a doctor's prescription to say, okay, you can break your fast, or, oh, I want to see a Muslim doctor. No. If the doctor is telling you that you need to get in those fluid intake and all that, then, or else your healing process will take longer, it'll prolong your illness, then you can actually break your fast. But if, for example, it doesn't affect it. You broke your leg. Does it affect it? You're a doctor. Does it affect it if you
pain medication, otherwise no.
Maybe pain medication, otherwise no. All right, so here we are. We're asking a doctor. All right, so if it's not affecting the illness, then you would have to fast. Go ahead.
So what is the ruling about migraines? People say we don't keep fast because we get intense migraines because of fasting.
So any type, when we talk about pain, all right, the migraine, it can be from severe to not very severe. So if the person, for example, is not able to handle the pain, unless they take ibuprofen, then they would have to make up that day. Right? They would have to make up that day, and they can take their ibuprofen. So it's the person. There's something called rukhsa, and there's something called azim. What's the difference? Rukhsa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you the permissibility to break the fast when you're observing severe hardship. Migraines can be really hard. You have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's permission to break the fast. But there's the azima. What is the azima? You're going for, let me call it the bonus, and you're putting that enthusiasm, though, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if I'm going through all this pain, because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm going to fast, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give me the reward. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give me the reward based on the hardship that I'm facing. Ya Allah, I'm facing lots of hardship, and I'm doing it just for your sake. So scholars have different opinions on whether azima is better than rukhsa or not because of a hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna Allah yuhibbu an tu'ta rukhsahu kama yuhibbu an tu'ta azaim." The Prophet ﷺ actually said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes that people take the permission or the excuse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just like He would like that people would take the enthusiasm to do more. Alright? Now, scholars had different opinions. Does that mean it's best to go for rukhsa or azima? So in that case, like I said, both the Prophet ﷺ observed both. The Prophet ﷺ would do the rukhsa and sometimes would take the azima. Alright? So, did I answer your question? Yes. Alright. Now, we'll end right here next week, inshallah, at the same time, but please make it at 1 so we can pray at 1:15 Dhuhr, and then we'll continue. We're going to be talking about the issue of women's period, menstruation, and istihada, and the rulings that relate to that. You can see the packet with you. I will be uploading the video, inshallah, this lecture. We'll be uploading it on YouTube, so you can take your notes if you missed out on something. Alright? And next week, we'll be talking about postpartum period. Flip the page. No, no. And breastfeeding, pregnant women and breastfeeding, do they have to make up, or can they pay fidya or pay kafara? What is it, kafara, or what is it? A person that has a hard job, and we're going to talk about, for example, when it comes to husband and wife relations, some certain rulings on that. I may turn off next week. I may turn off on some issues. Turn off the Facebook Live on that. We'll talk about the kafara and the fidya. We'll also talk about consent. Inshallah, for the we'll be inshallah covering a lot more. You go to Gems of Light on YouTube, Gems of Light, and we've got our the videos there.
I don't know if you're going to be covering the later chapters, but fast Ramadan, every couple of days for the period. You don't know how many.
You pretty much about calculate. I don't know. Try to calculate. Try to just make it finish. And then we can
Can you make your
we're going to talk about the tashriq في النية. Hold on, let me just turn this one.
Menopause and problems of,
Yeah, we're going to talk about menopause and those issues, inshallah.